Everyone around you is connected, scrolling, talking, reacting, filling every second with someone else's noise. And you, sitting alone, are told something is wrong with you. They call it loneliness. They say you're missing out. They make you feel like the empty room is a punishment. But here's what no one tells you. The people who built empires, wrote the books that outlasted centuries, and changed how humanity thinks, most of them did it alone. Not because they had no one, because they chose the silence. They understood something the crowd will never understand. Noise produces reaction. Silence produces clarity. And clarity is where power is born. This is not a video about being antisocial. It's not about pushing people away or hiding from the world. It's about something far more important. It's about what happens inside you when the noise finally stops. What the crowd does to you. Think about the last time you were completely alone. No phone, no music, no one to talk to. How long before you started feeling uneasy? Most people can't sit with themselves for 30 minutes. They reach for something, anything. A screen, a conversation, a distraction. Because silence forces a confrontation with your thoughts, with your doubts, with the version of yourself that you've been too busy to acknowledge. The crowd is a hiding place. When you're surrounded by people, you don't have to think. You just follow the temperature of the room. You absorb opinions, you mirror energy, you react. But you don't actually live. The Stoics saw this clearly. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire, commanded armies, held the fate of millions in his hands, and still carved out hours of solitude every day to write in his journal. Not because he was lonely, because he knew the moment you stop being alone with your thoughts, someone else starts thinking for you. And the longer you let that happen, the harder it becomes to hear your own voice. Most people go through life never questioning where their opinions came from, never asking whether their values are truly theirs, or whether they simply absorb them from the nearest crowd. Solitude is the only place where that question gets answered honestly. The discomfort is the point. Nobody warns you about this part. When you first start sitting with yourself, really sitting, without distractions, it's uncomfortable. Not a little uncomfortable. Deeply, almost painfully uncomfortable. Old regrets surface. Fears you've suppressed come forward. You start questioning things about your life that you've never let yourself question. People interpret this as a sign that something is wrong. They use it as evidence that solitude is bad for them. They run back to the noise. But they've misread the signal. That discomfort isn't a warning. It's a symptom of healing. Think about a wound that was never cleaned. The moment you finally clean it, it stings. Not because you made it worse, because you're treating it for the first time. The fears that surface in solitude were already there. You just couldn't hear them over the noise. Seneca wrote about this directly. He said that you should occasionally practice a version of deprivation, stepping back from comfort, from company, from distraction, to test your own character. Not to suffer, to see, to find out what you're actually made of when no one is watching and nothing is distracting you. What remains when everything external is stripped away, that is you. Not the role you play at work, not the personality you perform for others. The thing underneath all of that. And here's the truth that most people never discover. That thing underneath the real version of you is far stronger than the performance on top, the weaponization of loneliness. At some point, someone decided that being alone was a problem to solve, and an entire industry was built around it. Social media doesn't sell connection. It sells the fear of being disconnected. The slight anxiety that something is happening somewhere that you're not part of. The nagging feeling that if you put your phone down, you'll fall behind. This fear is not accidental. It's engineered. Because a person who is comfortable alone is very difficult to sell things to. They don't need constant entertainment. They don't seek validation from strangers. They don't confuse followers with friends. A person at peace with their own silence becomes, in a very real sense, unreachable. Not emotionally cold, not disconnected from people, but immune to manipulation through loneliness. Epictetus, a man who was born a slave and died, one of the most admired philosophers in Rome, said that freedom begins the moment you stop caring about what lies outside your control. And almost everything the world uses to pull you out of solitude, the opinions, the trends, the social pressure, lives entirely outside your control. The moment you stop needing their approval, their power over you disappears. That's not arrogance, that's freedom. What grows in silence? There's a kind of thinking that cannot happen in a crowd. Not the kind where you process information or debate ideas. The kind where you sit with a problem long enough to actually understand it. Where you let an idea live in your mind for hours without rushing to share it. Where you question your own assumptions without needing someone to validate the question. This is the thinking that changes things. Newton didn't discover gravity at a dinner party. Tolstoy didn't write War and Peace while socializing. Darwin spent years alone on a ship, then more years alone in thought, before a single word of his theory reached the world. Solitude is not where you wait for life to begin. It's where the most important work actually happens. Not the visible work, the internal work. The slow, unglamorous process of deciding who you are and what you actually believe. Of sitting with a value you inherited from your parents or your culture and asking honestly, do I believe this, or was I simply never alone long enough to question it? This is confronting work, but it's the only work that makes every other part of your life more solid. Because when you know what you actually stand for, nothing can shake you. Not criticism, not rejection, not failure. You've already faced the hardest. Judge yourself in the silence. Everything else is just noise. Solitude is not isolation. Here's where people misunderstand this completely. Embracing solitude doesn't mean becoming a hermit. It doesn't mean cutting people off or walking through life without connection. The Stoics were not isolated figures. Marcus Aurelius led an empire. Seneca advised emperors. Epictetus had hundreds of students. They were deeply engaged with the world. But they engaged from a different foundation than most people. They came to the world complete, not looking for it to fill something in them, not relying on it to tell them who they were. And because of that, their relationships were different. They didn't need people, they chose people. They didn't tolerate mistreatment to avoid being alone. They were already comfortable alone. They didn't perform. They didn't chase approval. They didn't bend. And paradoxically, people were drawn to them because of it. There is something magnetic about a person who needs nothing from you. Not in a cold way, in a complete way. When you're comfortable in your own silence, you stop placing impossible demands on the people around you. You stop needing them to fix your emptiness. You stop tolerating connections that drain you because you're afraid of what will be left if they're gone. What will be left is you. And that's more than enough. The practice. This doesn't happen by accident. Most people stumble into solitude only when it's forced on them after a breakup, a loss, a transition. And because they've never practiced it willingly, they experience it only as pain. But you can learn to use it intentionally. Not for hours every day, not dramatically. Start with 20 minutes of genuine quiet. No podcast in the background, no phone nearby. Just you and whatever thoughts arrive. Don't try to solve anything. Don't try to feel productive. Just observe. What thoughts come first? What do you avoid? What does your mind reach for when there's nothing to reach for? The answers are uncomfortable, but they're also yours. After enough time in your own company, something shifts. The quiet stops feeling like absence. It starts feeling like presence. Your presence. You begin to trust your own thinking more, to rely less on the opinions of others, to calibrate your decisions, to make choices that are actually yours, not assembled from the approval of people who don't have to live your life. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, the quality of your life is nothing more than the quality of your thoughts. Solitude is where you take control of that, where you decide which thoughts stay and which you let go, where you stop being a product of your environment and start being the author of your own mind. This is the real work. Not loud, not visible, not something you can post about or be praised for. But it changes everything. The world is going to keep getting louder. There will always be more content, more opinions, more reasons to stay connected, more ways to fill the silence before it has a chance to say anything. And most people will keep filling it. Every hour, every year, for the rest of their lives. Running from themselves at full speed. But not you. You're here because something in you already knows that the quiet is not a punishment, that being alone is not a sign of weakness. It's a practice, a discipline, a form of strength that the noise can never produce. The Stoics didn't fear the silence. They went looking for it, because they understood that every person who has ever built something real inside themselves or in the world built it there first. In the stillness, in the solitude, in that uncomfortable, underestimated, deeply powerful space that most people spend their entire lives running from. You don't have to run. Stand still. Listen. What you hear in the silence is yours. And it is more than enough. If this video spoke to you, subscribe not for the content, but for the commitment. The commitment to think deeper, live quieter, and grow stronger than the noise around you.